Welcome to the Cartridge Archive, the show dedicated to chronicling the complete Nintendo 64 library, one cartridge at a time. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Adam. In each episode of this podcast, we will pull a game from the shelf and explore its impact on the Nintendo 64's history. From beloved classics and hidden gems to forgotten curiosities and infamous disasters, no cartridge is left behind.
Along the way, we'll examine each game's story, development, legacy, collector value, and the impact it left on the Nintendo 64 as a whole.
Then we will put it through the rigorous and totally patented 64-point inspection to determine whether it has what it takes to become certified 64.
So prestigious. So, yes, welcome to our kickoff episode, our little mini episode 0. Thank you for joining us on this attempt at a podcast.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm a recovering podcaster myself, so I've been looking for excuses to get back to this and had many people offer excuses, and Jamie reached out with a pretty well already planned out idea, and I couldn't say no. So, back at it.
Sucker. Yeah, so I mean, real quick, who are we and why are we doing this? I guess would be a good place to start. I mean, Adam, you already mentioned it. You've got a history with working on podcasts, specifically gaming podcasts in the past. You want to give us a little bit of a rundown as to, your connection to the N64 in particular and podcasting as a whole?
Yeah. So like you were saying, I as a kid wanted to be on the radio, eventually did that and didn't love it, and then went into podcasting way back in the early days. If I knew then what I know now, that I could have been a bazillionaire, I probably should have done that. But we started with, for anybody who was around in that time, there may not be very many, the STA show, Sound the Alarm podcast, and Start Select podcast, and did all of that stuff. And now here we are. As for my connection to the Nintendo 64, Jamie and I are about the same age, and was coming up in sort of we are old, and coming up in the sort of early teens, tweens age. Video games are something that most of us did, and this was just sort of a time when games are really becoming huge, becoming what they are now, the sort of the beginnings of that. And there's some of the best games ever on the N64, so it was very formative time for, I think, people our age and the industry.
Yeah. And
so it's really great to go back and explore some of this stuff.
Yeah, no, it was definitely like a gaming sweet spot for me personally. When I was, coming up, it was around the time where I was able to start following news myself, figuring out what I wanted myself, getting excited and saving up my pocket money and getting on hype trains for the first time officially. Subscribing to Nintendo Powers and EGMs and finding out what the news was and getting pumped about games that were coming down the pipeline. The Nintendo 64 was one of those things that was telegraphed ahead of time, what with it being advertised as the Ultra 64 on Killer Instinct arcade machines and all that. So I was more than ready for this thing when it came out. And it was one of those things that I'd saved up for a couple of years prior, poured through all of the magazine clippings in order to know the latest news and rumors about the thing, and then, counting down the days to when it finally came out. So the N64 for me was pretty much, it wasn't my first console. It wasn't my first gaming experience either, but it's definitely the first one that I consider to be, mine. I was there for the beginning, I was there for the duration, and I was a big participant of it the whole way through. And yeah, like you said,
that's it too, the internet.
Yeah.
The internet was sort of becoming something where most of us had access to it at that point. And so there were like newer, faster ways to get that information than there ever was before. The Ultra 64 thing too, that you said, that is, I remember at some point growing up in Central Florida area, being in Pine Hills, just outside Orlando, bustling metropolis, not known for its quality of life necessarily. But I remember being, for whatever, and I don't know why this sticks out to me, but every time I see Ultra 64, I remember there was like a movie theater or something there that we had stopped at, and I remember seeing a Killer Instinct cabinet with the Ultra 64, like, was part of its like a tracked loop. And I remember just being like, dude, Ultra 6, what is that? And then it, of course, a year or two later, becomes just the Nintendo 64 and is a thing. But every time I hear Ultra 64, for whatever reason, it takes me to like that moment when I was like 11 or 12.
There's a whole story behind that too, and I'm looking forward to getting into that when we get to the Killer Instinct Gold episode. So that'll be a fun one to get on. Yeah, so I mean, I am a gaming enthusiast, and as you said, that was sort of like the sweet spot for gaming for me. And it doesn't hurt that Nintendo 64 has some of my favorite games of all time on it. So yeah, this podcast is a really great opportunity for me because I'm also decided to take on the foolish task of trying to collect all of the domestic, U.S. domestic released Nintendo 64 games as far as the collection goes. So I'm making my way through it. I'm doing pretty good. Been doing it for a couple of years now. I think I'm about past the 2/3 point, but yeah, there's just shy of 300 games officially on this thing, and making my way through. I'm trying to collect them all. And this podcast is going to be a great way to get me to actually play some of these damn things as I start accruing this big pile of plastic in my living room. So I'm really excited about jumping in on games that I've played in the past, see how they hold up, remember things that I'd forgotten about, trigger some core memories, and then maybe kind of reevaluate them under a modern day lens, but then also kind of get in on some games that I may have dabbled on or I'd heard about, but I'd not actually played. And I think this is going to be a really cool experience, just going to chronicle the whole thing and kind of take a look at it from a collector's perspective as well as a nostalgic one as well.
And that's such a good point too, because I remember, like you were saying, having pocket money as a kid, things along those lines, and we would see these games in magazines, and there are games that I have read about probably hundreds of times and seen screenshots, but I don't know if I ever actually got to play them. I either couldn't afford them, or I didn't have a friend who had them, or it comes time to rent something and you grab something that is familiar and there's some other game that you've seen a trillion times, but you just never got to it. And so now we have the ability to get to them more easily than we did. And that's a very different look as far as that stuff goes. So I think it's really cool that there are games where I feel like I know them inside and out, but I don't know if I've ever played them. And so this gives us an opportunity to look at that and see if they were really as good as we hoped that they were going to be, since we didn't really get to play them.
Yeah. Or substantially worse. Maybe we'll find some secret gems, or we will be able to kind of take off the nostalgia goggles and really see things for what they actually are. So I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be really good. And I think we've got an awesome format figured out for how we're going to do this. So I'm glad that I was able to trick you into doing this, and I think it's going to be a really good thing. Along the way, we will have a selection of guests joining us for specific episodes. Friends of ours who played these games with us when we were younger, people that may be connected to the games in some way or the other podcasts and content creators. I think it's going to be a really great opportunity to kind of collaborate and get some other voices on here as well besides ours. But so yeah, the main crux of what this podcast is going to be centered around, we alluded to it before, the 64-point inspection. And this is something I'm really excited about, and I think it's going to be a really fun way of analyzing and looking and dissecting these games. I think it's going to be interesting. And so I just wanted to take this time to kind of walk through how this process is going to work and what the plan is for it, at the outset before we dive in. So I have an official write-up here, which I will I will read, and then maybe we can just kind of go into the different categories. So the Nintendo 64-point inspection. This is a carefully crafted evaluation designed to judge every Nintendo 64 game through a series of 10 tests. For each test, we will present the evidence, make our case, and put the game to a vote. If the game passes the test, it earns 10 points. If it fails, it earns none. If opinions are split, then it gets the 5 points. If any game earns 64 points or higher, it passes the inspection and receives our coveted certified 64 seal. And if it doesn't, well, it doesn't.
It gets cast into where it already was for a lot of people. History. There
you go. Or the bargain bin at a dusty old Blockbuster, which is where most of these games were found for me when I was buying them back in the day. So yeah, let's fire this off.
So I will kick it off, and we'll talk about what these tests are. Credit to Jamie for naming these, because these are pretty killer. So the memory pack test.
I'm sure there was something. Ah, yes, now I remember.
What we're going to look at is if this game is still remembered today, or if it has faded into obscurity. Would the average gamer today recognize this game? And so this is I get a little bit of this, because there are games that I remember that I never played. There are probably games that people loved that no one remembers.
Yeah. See where this holds up, where this stands in people's minds now, and whether it deserves to be remembered or not. I think that's going to be a key part of this as well. So test number 2 The Rumble Pack test.
This is the Rumble Pack, the coolest cinematic gaming experience there is.
Does this game really take advantage of what made the Nintendo 64 unique? 4-player multiplayer, analog controls, accessories, other signature N64 features like that.
Calling it the Rumble Pack test is right there. It's the first time that anybody had tried anything like that. And so it really, now you see it absolutely everywhere, but in its time, unbelievable.
Yeah, the Nintendo 64 was we can look back at it now and call it quirky, but it was innovative and at least adventurous and ambitious in some of its design choices and some of its features. And to that end, I think a successful Nintendo 64 game has to be equally quirky and adventurous. So this category will be a good way of trying to see which games actually push that envelope and which ones played it safe, which ones are essentially a port of a game that could have existed on a PlayStation or another console at the time.
Test number 3 is going to be the expansion pack test.
That is one powerful piece of machinery.
Does this game deserve an expansion, a sequel, a remake, a modern successor, or in some cases, does it already have one? Was there enough here to justify a future beyond the original cartridge?
Yeah, and this is going to be a good one to kind of take a bit of a future history lesson, right? We're going to be able to look at the history behind the game, and then now we're going to be, in hindsight, able to look at the what happened after the game was released and whether or not that was justified or did the game get a short straw on that front.
I think there's going to be definitely some where I do wonder why there's not more, and probably some that I never played it back then, and maybe that's why it didn't sell great. That, man, it really would be cool if they brought this back. I'd be interested to see some of that.
Absolutely. And maybe we'll unearth some of the reasons as to why things shook out the way that they did as well. Hindsight's 2020. So I think this is going to be an interesting educational opportunity for all of us. Test number 4, the barrel roll test.
Do a barrel roll.
Impressive, Star Fox.
How impressive was this game for its time? Did it push the boundaries of technology, gameplay, graphics, scale, or innovation? This kind of piggybacks off of the expansion pack test, but instead of being specifically a Nintendo 64 quirk or feature, just broadly, what does this game do, or what did this game do first? What did it accomplish? How did it influence what games would follow it? Was this a trendsetter, or did this play it safe and just kind of follow along with the status quo?
I'm not going to show my hand, but there are a few things that I'm thinking of where it is interesting. Maybe the first time I saw something like that in a game, and sometimes the only time I saw stuff like that in a game. There's some mechanics that are out there where it would kind of be cool if they did come back, and it makes you wonder why maybe we didn't see more of that. Test number 5 is going to be the joystick gymnastics test.
Yeah! Woohoo! Yahoo!
How well does this game play today? Are the controls and camera still enjoyable, or are they working against the player? This definitely makes a lot of sense, because this was a time when 3D games were still, true 3D games were very much in their infancy. Camera controls were still definitely in the works. Analog stick being like a full-time part of the process was definitely a little bit of a learning curve. And I guess to continue using that quirky angle, N64 controller was a little unconventional. And I almost feel like I'm going to be concerned going back to that. Can I still do this like I did it 30 years ago?
Yeah, we'll be able to also kind of look at it from a modern day perspective as well, because obviously you can play these games, many of these games on modern Nintendo consoles, and they have some features built into them that make it a little bit more digestible in a modern day gaming setting. But whenever possible, I do want to try and analyze it from how it actually was when it was shipped originally. Test number 6, the bum to the bass test.
Here we go.
How good was this game's audio? Does it have memorable music, iconic sound effects, or the kind of soundtrack that sticks with you long after you put the controller down? Nintendo 64 had a fantastic assortment of game soundtracks, sound effects, and attempts at audio across the entire collection that I'm excited to see which games get the love here, because they might not be the ones that you expect. And when we're talking about core memories and how these things had an impression on us when we were growing up, I think the audio aspect of it is a massive part, and getting to relive that and analyze it and give the games their flowers is going to be a fun part of this.
There's definitely some like major totemic ones, obviously, that are very memorable, not to bring a fancy vocab word out, but I think you're right that there's going to be games where we've either forgotten about them or didn't get to play much with them in the past and look at them now and go, dude, this music is awesome. I think, too, there was a time before voice acting was as frequently found in games as it is now, and partially because of technical limitations at the time and of the N64 specifically. So really the music and the sound effects did a lot of speaking for characters.
Yeah. And some of the tricks, some of the techniques, and some of the methods that were used to really get every drop of capability out of the hardware limitations was pretty damn impressive back in the day. So I'm very excited about geeking out over this category.
I'm definitely looking forward to this one. Test 7 is going to be the Smash Invite test.
Will this battler live up to expectations?
Does this game have characters, worlds, music, or ideas worthy of a place in Super Smash Brothers? And of course, there are quite a few that are, and quite a few that have made their impact. Even some I've learned about recently that I didn't realize were in there. But there are other ones that are certainly not explored or maybe weren't even considered. And I think that's going to be kind of cool to look at some of these hidden gem characters.
Yeah, for sure. And, Smash Brothers, this category is important, whether or not you like Smash Brothers or not. It's Smash Brothers is sort of like the Nintendo kingmaker, right? Like if you're included in Smash Brothers, you mattered. You are part of Nintendo history to the level that Nintendo was willing to acknowledge you. Whether it's just simply you got a couple of tracks from your game in the soundtrack, or you're a collectible item, or a cameo, or a background nod, or if you're a fully fleshed out character, right? There's different ways to grade how involved a game deserves to be, but to be included in any capacity in a game like Smash Brothers that is supposed to be sort of a catalog of all things relevant to Nintendo and, in many cases, gaming beyond Nintendo, I think that this is going to be a really cool way to kind of consider things to be included, and we could come up with some ideas and some proposals of how certain characters or stages or power-ups could potentially be leveraged, and some probably terrible ideas as well, let's be honest. So
it's pretty interesting. It's like getting voted into the Hall of Fame, except when you get there, people beat the shit out of you.
You get that envelope, that trademark Smash Brothers envelope with the little seal on the back of it, and you open it up, and just a fist just smashes you right in the face.
Yeah, it's like you get inducted to the Hall of Fame, and you're like, this is a great honor, but I don't know if I want to be here because now I have to, for the foreseeable future, physically fight people. That could be tough.
Test number 8, the 101% test.
Oh, they are running up the score.
Is this game worth fully completing? Are the extra challenges, collectibles, and secrets worth the effort? A big part of going back and reviewing a game collection of almost 300 titles, you have to kind of look at things from a bit of a distance here. Is this game worth investing the time to really eke out everything in it? Back in the day, there weren't achievements or trophies to try and get you to get the full 1,000 out of 1,000 points or get that platinum trophy. So in many cases, to be driven to complete a game to 100%, or in some cases 101%, you had to be really dedicated to it. And then obviously we were at a different stage of our lives, and you didn't have a new game coming out every other week, and you didn't have affordable titles. Nintendo has never been particularly affordable, particularly back in this era. So you invested in a game, you had a game, that was your game for a while. So you had to kind of milk it for what you could. And I think it's going to be interesting to look at how the game actually scoped for that, and what the incentives were, or is this just an obligation at this point? And I think this is going to be an interesting way of looking at a game, both from a scale perspective, but also a quality of content perspective.
I feel like games too at the time, people now do look at it much more as like a value proposition. If I'm paying $60 or $70 or whatever it is for this game, is there enough to do? But then you find like things getting shoehorned in, like go find all the comic books and within this whatever world, or there's places to take photos. There's a scenic photo opportunity. Did you get all of those? And it almost, this was a time before they really got into that. So some games had it, some games didn't. Now it seems, people complain when you don't have enough to do, but it seems like there's a lot of games where it just falls flat. I ran all the races. I won all of them. And now what do I do? So it's interesting to look back and explore that. Is there enough to do here? Was it worth it if I did do all of it?
Yeah. But not only is there enough to do, but is it achievable as well? Like, as we mentioned, some of these controls, some of these games, some of these foibles of older games just tend to be punishingly difficult. And is this one of those things where you can try to complete this game, but you're never going to complete this game? So what is the level of satisfaction that goes along with that, and where's a good stopping point? How realistic is total completionist status, and is that worth actually striving for?
Test number 9 is the Wario Wallet test.
Oh my God!
Is this game worth the price of admission today? Do you get your money's worth in picking up this game considering today's collector market price? This is an interesting one to bring up because as these games get more and more scarce, they get harder to find. The prices go up coming out of 2020 with a lot of the stuff around COVID shortages and people getting bored at home. And as these games get more and more scarce, as people have thrown them away over the years and stuff like that, the price has gone up. And this especially, Jamie physically seeking to collect all of these. Some of them are tough to find and some of them are fairly expensive.
Yeah, some of them are absolutely ridiculous, and they're ridiculous for different reasons. And that's what I want to get into in this category. Some games are absolute rubbish, but command a very high ticket price. And I want to get into the how and why of that and take a look at what this game is worth, loose or complete, and what the average kind of eBay used market prices are looking like. But then I also want to look at, is this game available to play in another capacity? Was it ported to another console at a later date? Is it available on the Switch 2 expansion pack, for example? And this will be an interesting way of really evaluating, like you said, the value proposition in physically owning it. Obviously, we recognize that emulation is a big part of a modern-day Nintendo 64 gamers' arsenal as well. So, is this a game that's worth actually having? Or is this one that's just worth, tinkering around for a couple of minutes on a ROM and calling it a day? So I look forward to getting into that. Obviously, I come to the side of this argument of wanting to own everything physically, for better or worse. And that's where I'm going to kind of focus on. So this is a bit of a self-indulgent category for me, because it's going to help me feel a little bit better about the finds that I've made on eBay over the past couple of years, or really bum me out right towards the end of this test. So we'll see how it goes.
It is interesting, though, because I remember a time when I've never, of course, been on a quest to find every single game from a platform. But I remember especially like old sports games, because they're out of date immediately. You've got newer technologies come out, upgraded engines. You've got, player rosters turnover. And I remember there was a time when if it was a sports game and it was more than a year old, it was like $1. Mm-hmm. And some of those games, even now on the N64, are $10. They're still 10 times what they were a few years ago. And going back and look at it, there's probably historical times when some of these games were like 50 cents. And so as they become more scarce and things like that, I just happen to be looking at a game, which I will not reveal because we have this category, but I'm looking at it and its price right now, new, sealed in the box, is not that much different than what it was brand new in the late 90s, because the value hasn't skyrocketed. But, there's games out there. I think just recently there was a NES Mario game that sold for multiple millions of dollars factory sealed, because that's how rare it is to find it in that condition.
Yeah, for sure. And just for clarity's sake, we're not going to get too much into the true collector's market. This is going to be for a person that wants to get a game and actually play it. So we're not going to get into graded copies. We're not going to get into the different variants of carts too much, unless relevant for the topic. So it's really going to be about, if you are foolish enough to want to try and do the same thing that I'm doing right now, a little bit more information as to what you might be getting into if you wanted to undertake that. And the last test that we have here, test number 10, the Nostalgia Goggles test. Does this game stand the test of time and genuinely hold up today, or is its reputation being carried by nostalgia? This is obviously the crux of a lot of people's conversations about games, historical, Nintendo 64 or otherwise. Does this game actually earn the reputation that it has? Did it get shortchanged? Does it get a glow up unnecessarily? Where does it actually land now? Let's look at this, warts and all, and be as honest as possible. How is this game in a current setting, and how was it back in the day, and how much does that change between the two? And
there are definitely games that are, as you said before, all-timers. There's games that a lot of us look at and go, this is one of my favorite games I've ever played. And in some cases, that does still hold up very well, but maybe there's a little bit of a sheen over how I felt about it 30 years ago. It might not be quite as good, but it might still be very good. But there are also games that have very much earned that. And so we can see which ones earned it and continue to have it, which ones have dimmed ever so slightly, or like you said, maybe ones that got undue negative attention and they're not as bad as people think.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to kind of unearthing a couple of turds and actually taking a proper look at it and be like, you know what? There's some pretty good stuff going on here that we would have just dismissed because we were comparing it to another title, or I'm not spending my money on that, I'm spending my money on this, therefore that has to be terrible and I'm going to belittle it, right? So I think now we get to kind of look back, positive and negative, and really take a proper look at where things sit.
I'm definitely a proponent of the games as art sort of school of thought as well. So even if a game isn't not necessarily good, it doesn't mean that there's not something good about it. I think there's something valuable that we can find in just about every game. It can play awful, sound awful, but it might look okay. You know, there's going to be something positive, I think, to just about every game we play here. And I think it'll be good to give it that fair shot, especially in the age of the internet. It's very easy to just pile on and go, I've never even played this, but everyone else says it's bad. I'm just going to assume it is. And I think it'll be good to maybe find some of those bright spots.
Absolutely. Yeah. Give credit where credit is due. Maybe a game that wasn't necessarily known for much accomplished something very well. And that's what we want to look at here. So another part of that is that we'll get into it in the full episodes, but we want to actually focus on things that can be learned from these games and potentially applied to new games that are in development now. And I think that there's going to be some interesting insight that we'll be able to gather, positive or negative, from a lot of these titles. But yeah, so I mean, that's the inspection, right? So 10 opportunities to earn 10 points, make it to 64 points, and you get to be certified 64. I think it's going to be very interesting to see which games actually make that cut and how many of them do versus how many of them don't. And maybe there'll be some surprises where one that we would have thought would be a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame is actually missing the mark, or inversely, a game that we would have thought stood no chance actually has enough going for it where it's able to eke out some points. I think these categories are done in a way where it is anybody's game, and there's an opportunity for most titles to pick up some points. And I'm excited to dive into this. You know, one game at a time, one focus for each episode, and it's gonna be. I'm really looking forward to doing this with you. I'm excited about it.
So one thing that we do want to put out there is we want this to be interactive as well. So if there are games that you found to be impactful on your younger days, or maybe you weren't even around for those days and you're just finding them for the first time now, we definitely want for listeners to be able to reach out to us. So we're going to get some social channels and stuff shared when we get to the initial batch of episodes, and get a little more substantial method set up for you to be able to do that. And we want to be able to see. And of course, people may not agree with us. So we want to have that discussion.
Yeah, I think there's. Sorry, I was going to say I think there's going to be some verdicts that we get that are going to be popular and some that will be decidedly unpopular. I'm looking forward to seeing where we land compared to our listeners and other people as well. So I think that's going to be a cool way of getting an interactive experience. So, you know, shoot us notes, tell us what we're doing right, tell us what we're doing wrong, tell us where we missed the mark or where we landed our shots. And yeah, I think this is going to be a fun experience, game to game, episode to episode.
So once we get the feed launched and everything, we'd love it if everybody would subscribe, follow along, and communicate with us so that we can get this dialogue open between people other than just the two of us. We'd certainly love to hear your thoughts on some of these things as well.
Yeah, this is going to be fantastic. So again, thank you for joining us on this sort of little introductory episode to kick this thing off. And I'm looking forward to cracking into episode number 1.
The Cartridge Archive was created by Jamie Guy and is produced and hosted by Jamie Guy and Adam Jones. Our music is by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. More episodes of the Cartridge Archive are available wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.